Learn about the McCarthy Forest, the McCarthy Meadows, and the Southern Corridor, and what's going on right now. We've got panelists of groups working to protect our local green space. Yes, I'm supposed to be introduced, but I'm just doing this little, and then, okay, never mind. Okay, everything is fine. Let's all remain calm. And so this event is co-hosted by OSEAN, which is the Ottawa South Eco Action Network, and the Hunt Club Community Association. So please, Marianne.
Okay, thank you all for coming. We're very excited to have you here. So my job is really to introduce the moderator, which you already heard from. So anyways, I will introduce her though, because that's my role. So Christine Johnson is a former elementary school teacher and principal with the OCD-SB, where she engaged her communities in a love of learning about self, others, and environment for 31 years. From the schoolhouse to the neighborhood, Christine transitioned to become the president of her local Hunt Club Community Association in 2015 and 2016. Stepping back from that role, Christine then immersed herself in learning about her immediate natural environment with a focused interest on restoring Paul Landry Park to make it a desirable feature in the neighborhood. Christine has just recently been elected to the Hunt Club Community Association as president for the 2026 operational year. She hopes to help improve the quality of life for all Hunt Club residents by strengthening partnerships with adjacent community associations, environmental groups, and city services. And before I hand it back to her, I'd just like to say right now, this has been an amazing collaboration with so many environmental groups and local groups and community associations. Ottawa South Eco Action Network has the pleasure to help co-host and lead this event, and I am so grateful for all of the amazing volunteers that OSEAN has. And here's a plug: come to our next meeting on Monday, January 26th, and come and join us, because we have a lot of fun together.
Thanks so much, Marianne. Very quickly, for those who don't know, bathrooms are immediately upon exiting. You walk past the gym, and there'll be gentlemen to your left and ladies to the right. Or you can go to the back of the community center, turn right, and you'll figure it out. You'll see where they are, okay? If you haven't already done so and you've got your phone with you, could you put it on mute, please? And what was the other one? Right, this is what's going to happen. I will introduce each panelist as it's their turn to speak, and hold your questions. You might want to write them down, but just hold them, because there are 10 panelists. We just added an extra one this morning or this afternoon. And after Q&As, there is an open house. We've got various organizations who have set up their booths at the back, and so you could check those out. And then at 3:15, there's going to be a sunset walk along the Rideau River, led by none other than Mr. Owen Clarkin and Mr. Jakob Mueller from the Ottawa Field Naturalist Club. And right, so we better get started, because we are now 12 minutes in behind schedule. Let's see if we can catch up. Speakers, you don't know this about me, but I am a task mistress, and that means I've got my stopwatch, and when it's almost 5 minutes, I'm going to knock or do something like that to say, hurry up, hurry up. I'll try not to be overly rude. I just got a look from one of my directors here who's saying, seriously, Christine, are you really going to do that? Well, I'll be polite, because I'm Canadian, right? So our first panelist, I'd like to welcome Andrei Grushman. And thank you for being here, Andrei. Andrei is one of the co-hosts of this event, and he's also an HCCA director wearing the Planning and Affordable Housing hat. In this role, he has worked closely with the Ottawa Field Naturalist Club on the protection of notable trees in Riverwood Park, which is part of Kinterra Riverwood. part of our neighborhood. More recently, he has helped to shape the HCCA's response, that's the Hunt Club Community Association, now you know, it's all HCCA, to the city's new zoning bylaw. Andrei, please come up, and you've got 5 minutes.
Thanks, Christine. I'm just going to stand so I can also see the screen in case my slides are going. I hope they're going to be projected. I emailed them to you.
When?
2 or 3 hours ago. And to Christophe. Where's Christophe? Okay. So I'll get started. If you find them, that's great. If not, I have hard copy, and during the open house, people could come up and look at some of the maps that I'm talking about. I've got a deal with Christine that she won't start my 5 minutes until I start looking at the maps, or showing the maps. So what I wanted to do was, A, thank everybody for coming, thank all the panelists who have shown up. All of the panelists have helped us get to this point already, and many of the people in the crowd have too. And I also want to say that we have some people with us who are active in the community now, who were part of the original campaign about 30 years ago to protect the McCarthy Woods corridor and McCarthy Woods when the first time the NCC tried to zone McCarthy Woods, for example, as light industrial. So there's a lot of history in the room. Irwin was part of that. John Sankey will be talking to us. Some folks from Van Hearst Place, Sarah Longhurst, and neighbors were all active at that time. So thanks to everyone for that. Have I eaten up the clock enough to get the maps going? No.
We don't have Wi-Fi. We don't have Wi-Fi, so.
Oh, you don't have, okay. All right, so I'll just talk to it. It's not a problem. It's basically a tale of two corridors. There's a green space corridor between Woodruff and Maryville along the railway line that the NCC is desperate to develop. It's right next to the Prime Minister's riding. It's been part of the NCC's plans for a long time to develop. It's in the Canada Public Land Bank. It's been released for development. The Prime Minister held his event to publicize the Build Canada Homes initiative in that corridor. So really the train has left the station there. Our main point has been that by zoning that land as development reserve in the new official, in the new zoning bylaw, the city would be preempting the baseline Maryville secondary plan that's currently underway, that's looking at that land among other things, and that will have a report ready in about a year. So that one, the NCC has a case. We think we have a case too. It's debatable. The second green space corridor is the McCarthy Woods corridor from the Rideau River all the way to the Airport Parkway. And there, it's a very different story. The NCC doesn't have any actual plans for development there. And in fact, their own version of the official plan has designated all of this land as NCC properties that they are committed to steward for the next 50 years at least, in perpetuity, or until they can transfer the land to a conservation trust. So by reaching out and persuading the city to zone, my goodness, you've done it. There it is.
So I have those slides on my
Wonderful.
presentation, so I was like,
Okay,
here
just
we
in the nick of time. So if you can look at it, the green part of the corridor is considered valued natural habitat by the NCC. It is, the McCarthy Woods per se is zoned by the city as environmental protection. Everything else that's black is now zoned, or proposed to be zoned, development reserve, which means it makes development a foregone conclusion. They're not going to be building next week, but when they do come back for a zoning amendment, they're going to be starting on the 1 yard line. There's also a very thin strip of light green that you can't see along the river which the NCC has designated as capital urban green space. So it makes zero sense that any of this land should be zoned development reserve. If the NCC does change its mind and wants to develop this land, it needs to amend its own designations. It's like an official plan amendment that they have to do, and then they can consider zoning amendments. But that is gorgeous, thank you. That saves a lot of time. So what Marianne has done is good. That is a picture of the McCarthy Woods corridor in the proposed zoning bylaw. Everywhere you see DR, that's going to be development reserve. So a large chunk of the riverfront near River Gateway, both the west and east sides of the meadow, right up to the very edge of McCarthy Woods, which is in the upper right corner. And then on the other side of McCarthy Road, between McCarthy and the Airport Parkway, north of Plant Drive, the mixed woodland wetland there is also going to be zoned DR. So that's what we found out last spring when the city went from draft 1 to draft 2. In draft 1, there was a nice mix of zones that reflects the current zoning, including an improvement in a couple of areas where they bumped it up to green space. We were happy with that. And then overnight, thanks to lobbying by the NCC behind the scenes, it all went to DR. We fell off our seats. So what has happened most recently in December, that Councillor Brockington has been very supportive all along, submitted a motion at committee stage to revert to something like that. There it is. And if I may quickly, you can see that along the river, the FAC, or open space facility zoning, has been restored, recreational zoning, and then along Hunt Club Woods and parallel to Uplands, there's recreation zoning, and finally, buffer for Plant Drive is green space. However, the pink bits that are labeled green, but are going to be zoned under this motion as neighborhood mixed use subzone 4. And what that means is they're just going to take the existing light industrial zoning and convert it to neighborhood mixed use, which is the equivalent in the current zoning bylaw. That sounds scary, and it's not ideal. It's not what we want. We would have liked the green space zoning that was in the first draft. But the reality is that the NCC has had light industrial zoning for those two parcels for decades, and they haven't done anything with it. And so that's the compromise, that we'll take half a loaf and we'll live to fight another day. Councillor Blockington,
just so you know.
I'm going to stop right there and let the other panelists have their say. And again, thank you all very much for showing up.
Thank you very much, and for adapting to the situation. You know, it's so Canadian. I have to put that in. Our next guest speaker is Marianne O, who most of you in this room know. Marianne is a biomedical researcher and mom, and she is the other co-host of this event. Marianne is a well-known community organizer, known for her environmental advocacy, involved with For Our Kids, Ottawa Gatineau, a group of parents and guardians working together to help families advocate for climate justice and a better future for all. Marianne has a passion for environmental projects and has been involved in Ottawa South Eco Action Network for almost 8 years. She has also been on the RPCA Garden Committee for the past 4 years and is a director of the Riverside Park Community Association. She has a PhD in biomaterials and biocompatibility of medical devices from Dalhousie University, and a Bachelor's of Engineering from Lakehead University. Welcome, and please go ahead, Marianne.
I'll take 30 seconds to say one of the reasons that I got involved in Ottawa South Eco Action Network is because of this little one right over here, who was about a year old when I met Aya, who was the original founder of OSEAN, and she became our daycare planner, and then she invited me and this little one to come to some of the meetings. And now we have our youngest OSEAN volunteer over there. I didn't tell you I was going to say that, I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to kind of repeat some of the things that Andrei said, because sometimes if you hear it twice, it kind of sticks into your mind. And Andrei and I and OSEAN and Hunt Club have been like living this for about 3 to 8 months now, so it's kind of just rolls off of our tongue, so hopefully this will help you orient. So I'm going to be talking about the NCC consultation, or lack thereof, engagement and transparency, that should have been happening before rezoning. And our focus is that we've kind of lost our trust in both the municipal and the federal government through this process, and to restore that trust, we need a full, impartial, and transparent assessment of the suitability of the land before we actually start to rezone it, and that should include active and fulsome public engagement. So the National Capital Commission, so the NCC, has not been transparent with its plans and desire to rezone these lands. Instead of choosing to engage the residents and share the federal plans publicly, it has instead chosen to hide their plans within a very complex and multifaceted municipal rezoning bylaw review. Now, if any of you have tried to dig deep into the bylaw review, you know that there is so much going on that it's very easy to miss things that happened. And thankfully, thanks to the Hunt Club Community Association, we didn't miss this. They were on the ball and they said, whoa, what happened between draft 1 and draft 3? So, local residents, when we talked to them, especially to Mireille going out there and going to the woods and talking to people, we found that they had no idea about these proposed changes to the southern corridor, both in our area and also down in Maryville. And they were very frustrated and shocked by the fact that this land that they have been actively using, the NCC is saying is underutilized and is going to be rezoned. And what is even more frustrating is that these changes happened after the very fulsome consultations of draft 1. So when the bylaw rezoning was happening, they were going ward to ward and talking about all the different things that were going to happen in each ward. Then there was draft 2 that had a few changes, and then bam, draft 3 comes. There was only about 4 months to actually read through over it, and that's when these changes happened. And we know that in draft 2 and in draft 3, the focus was predominantly on the texts of the codes and the definitions. It was not actually on these huge swathes of lands that were actually being changed. And there was no time to do a ward-based review. So here we say, the engagement strategy for draft 2 and draft 3 had no time for ward-specific discussions. There was no engagement of Ward 16 residents, no engagement of known stakeholders who would be concerned by these dramatic changes. OSEAN has been involved for over 10 years, protecting this area. We had no clue, they did not reach out to us. There was no engagement with the Hunt Club Community Association prior to this. And the city could have shared these rezoning changes, and they have changed them after the fact when we asked, hey, has there been any other green spaces that have changed to development reserve? They are able to provide that. Now, I don't want to necessarily be throwing the city under the bus, because I really believe that this is a federal issue that happened, and that the city kind of has to work hand in hand with NCC because they owned a large proportion, and the city can only do so much when a very, very fulsome draft review happens. Now, ironically, the NCC is throwing the city under the bus, because when OSEAN wrote to the NCC, we got an email back, and we said, the NCC hasn't really engaged, and all they said was, the city undertook engagement during the development of its zoning bylaw from 2022 to 2025, which is totally true. But the NCC changed their rules and changed their engagement in 2025, right at the very end. So there was no time for the city to truly take action on that. Now, why did the NCC do zero public engagement? Really, the engagement for changes to federal land is the responsibility, or we can say a co-responsibility if you want to be generous, for the federal government. And the NCC denied or delayed all attempts for a meeting with concerned groups. So the Hunt Club Community Association was on the ball. They were already trying to engage with them, and there was no no collaboration there. The NCC basically said, oh, don't worry, we're working with the city. They did not want to talk. They basically denied all meeting requests. We were very thankful to have Riley reach out to them on our behalf, and we didn't get anywhere. And why the rush and the hush to rezone now? Based on the letter we got from the NCC, they said there are currently no active development projects for any part of these sites. Now, whether or not we still believe them or trust them after this, I'm not so sure, but that is what they said in writing. And why rezone and restrict the zoning of this area before any study on suitability? So it says, any future development proposal on these lands would require a detailed planning process, include public consultation to determine the suitability of land use, density, layout, and other planning specifics. So that's from the NCC, right? They say we have to determine the suitability of land use. So why are they then preactively rezoning this to say, foregone, it's going to be developed if they haven't done the suitability of these testing?
We just went over 6 minutes.
Oh, shoot, okay, I'll be very fast. So draft 1 contained open spaces and green spaces. The NCC, you'll hear it over and over again, well, the city is not in alignment with their official plan. No, the city is completely in alignment with their official plan. They do not need to rezone these lands to get that to happen. The last thing that I'll talk about is, why is the NCC getting involved in potentially rezoning this? Well, again, some deep diving from Mireille found out that if you look at the budget for the NCC, they're supposed to find $65 million in savings for their next year. And this is, in their NCC budget, they have proposed that these savings are going to be coming from divesting or getting rid of lands in the tune of $45 million. So we see that, as always, follow the money and you'll follow the reasons. So this is a money issue, and I think what we need to be telling the NCC is that money has no place in these discussions. We need to be protecting these lands. Yes, the last one I will say is what Andrei mentioned. The NCC is ignoring its own assessment. So in 2015, they designated this area as a regional interest landmass worthy of conservation and stewardship. And then in 2025, in January, they repeated this. They redid this assessment, and they said, NCC will explore options to transfer these properties to an appropriate steward, such as a municipality or land conservation trust. So why is there a sudden shift that has had no community consultation? Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. And I do recognize it's hard to stick to 5 minutes. And, just cutting somebody off, it's hard. So our next speaker is our councillor, Riley Brockington, who's in his 3rd term serving our community. He's a lifelong resident of River Ward, grew up here in the public schools. After he graduated from Brookfield High School, he attended University of Ottawa, obtained his degree in economics, and then spent 16 years at Stats Canada, where he worked as a senior analyst economist. He has contributed to his community in many capacities, including 7 years with the River Park Community and Recreation Association, and 6 years with the Hunt Club Riverside Community Center Board of Directors, and 2 years with the Hunt Club Community Organization. Welcome, Councillor. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming on this snowy Saturday. Very important subject matter we're discussing today. I do want to thank the Hunt Club Association as well as OSEAN and all the stakeholders who have been engaged for many, many months now. This has been a journey of about 6 or 7 years. It started with a discussion about whether or not we expand the urban boundary. Then the city released 5 white papers that led into the official plan. The official plan is a blueprint document that just basically discusses zoning across the whole city. Council approved that in 2021. The province approved that in 2022. So that's the policy, the what. And what we're engaged now is the how. How are you going to implement those changes? And that triggered the comprehensive zoning bylaw review. The green space question is one of many that will be finalized on January the 28th. That is the date council will meet to receive the recommendations from the joint committee that met just before Christmas. In addition to the local green space matters, we're talking about basically how our neighborhood's going to change, particularly in the next 30 years, to welcome 400 to 500,000 more people. And we expanded the urban boundary a little bit, but it's how do you use existing space? How do you repurpose buildings that come end of life? And instead of a single family home, do you build a 3-story or 4-story with multiple units? Single family home neighborhoods, which Riverward has a lot of, are going to have more density. Near transit stations, very tall, very dense, within a 600-meter radius. We're talking about waiving mandatory parking requirements for developments. That's not getting a lot of attention. That will have significant impacts within neighborhoods, the change that we're going to have to look at. So there's been a lot of coverage. I've been talking about this at community associations literally for years. It's been part of my communication for years, but it's very difficult for the average resident to wrap their head around this. It's very difficult subject matter to understand all the ramifications. So that's sort of the history of where we are. As Andrei said, the current zoning of the green space corridor, so the southern corridor is really the Rideau River to the Airport Parkway. So think of that green space corridor that exists. The hydro corridor is exempt, that's separate. Hydro corridor lands are Hydro 1. And the actual McCarthy woods, the forested woods between McCarthy Road, westbound, right before Hunt Club, are off limits. They're environmentally protected. They are not part of this review. So the term Southern Corridor and McCarthy Woods are being used interchangeably, but we're really talking about is the Southern Corridor. All the other lands, about 9 different parcels of land that abut those woods. So along the river, Revelstoke area, all the way, as I said, to the Airport Parkway. And they've had about 3 or 4 different zoning designations prior to this study. And as Andrei said, a lot of the land already had green light for industrial. Just no one has really proceeded with development along this corridor now. When I first got involved in the community in the mid-90s, John Manley was our member of parliament here in Ottawa South, and he said, as long as I'm your member of parliament, these lands will not be touched. And our attempts to reach out to our local MPs now, David McGinty and Yasser Gnakvi, and while they've been receptive to outreach from various groups, we need a federal MP to say we're with you. We do not want these lands to be developed, and we're going to do our own outreach with the NCC to see if we can get them to reconsider. We haven't had that commitment yet, and it's been challenging in recent years when we're looking at saving Hunt Club Woods along Hunt Club Road on the airport property or other projects to have our local MPs have our back and pursue this. There's only so much I can do, and on federal land, if the federal government has an idea or a plan or a vision, they will do it, whether we support them or not, whether the zoning is in place or not, they will still go ahead. So the motion I put forward, which was passed 11-4 at joint committee, was more or less a compromise that staff weren't going to oppose and say in public session, we don't support the councillor's motion. So it required some finessing. There were 3 or 4 different motions that we had on the table before city staff of what we would have liked to have seen with that land to basically protect all of it. And what has been approved is that compromise. And so the areas that Andrei referenced, the mixed use, is the same land right now that has light industrial zoning to it, but would be a better fit for the 2 communities if development were to happen. All the other lands around there are protected or green space or recreation space, which I think the community would be supportive of. So the strategy has been to date to push my colleagues to revert back to the zoning that was proposed as part of the first version that came out. The city, in working with the public and stakeholders, went through 3 separate rounds. The final round is what we have before us, but my motion was successful in the fact that it has reversed some of the zoning to what Andrei put up there on the map. So, City Council has to ratify this, like I said, at the end of the month, and it's still open for any of my colleagues to put forward a motion to revert partials or all of it back to the original staff recommendation. I hope that does not happen. It's part of my job is to outreach with my colleagues, to have conversations, to reinforce why this is important. But again, we're holding our breath until the end of the month. Really, it's disappointing when community organizations and myself have written to the NCC. I've spoken to Toby Nussbaum to his face, the CEO of the NCC, say I've put in requests to meet with you. I'd like to sit down with you. Thank you. Alan Migueles, who's the lead planner at the NCC, who has responded to some of the organizations. Why are they refusing to meet the local city councillor? What do they have to lose to have a 15-minute meeting with me to discuss this? What are you hiding in those regards that you don't want to meet with us and have a face-to-face conversation? If this was just an empty parking lot, I could probably plug my nose and let land go and see it developed. This is hundreds of acres in 2 wards, and it's absolutely worth the fight to preserve this and restore it and keep it in public hands. Happy to take any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And next up is Mireille T, an environmental economist. And Mireille has lived in the Hunt Club Woods area of Ottawa for more than 18 years. She has an honors degree in economics and a master's degree in political science, both from Brock University. She also studied at the Sorbonne in Paris and the University of Karlstad. She has over 2 decades experience working in the federal public service, working on a wide range of environmental studies, policies, and programs. Highlights include leading the organization of an international marine fuel efficiency and emissions reduction conference, managing over 15 cost-benefit analysis studies, and leading the climate change stream of the Railway Safety Improvement Program. Mireille is a butterfly ranger, an active member of OSEAN, and recently became Environment Director at the Hunt Club Community Association. Welcome, Mireille.
Thank you. So, when my family first moved to Ottawa from Toronto 20 years ago, clean air and access to nature made it a great place to live, work, and play. I'm concerned the quality of life in our beloved city is in jeopardy if we sacrifice our urban spaces to development. I've dedicated most of my career to environmental policies and programs and assessing the environmental costs and benefits of business and policy decisions. It's hard for me to fathom that the NCC is pushing for development reserve zoning on urban green spaces protected for over 70 years, like the McCarthy Woods and Southern Corridor, without thorough community consultations and extensive research. This rush to build Canada strong on environmentally valuable lands is contrary to the federal government's environmental policies, programs, and commitments to protect Canada's lands and address climate change. For the past 5 years, I've been growing native plants for Habitat Gardens as part of the David Suzuki Foundation's Butterfly Way program to help reverse the habitat loss for insects and wildlife. Butterflies provide sources of pollen and nectar and safe places to nest and rest for butterflies, bees, insects, and other pollinators, birds, and wildlife across Canada. Over the past 2 years, I've expanded my reach by actively volunteering with OSEAN and the Ottawa Wildflower Seed Library. OSEAN volunteers like Marianne, Lynn, and others give away thousands of native plants to community and private habitat garden projects, supporting many butterfly ways across southern Ottawa. So across Ottawa. Over the past, and yet our collective efforts pale in comparison to the ecosystems and valuable habitat built by Mother Nature in the McCarthy Woods and Southern Corridor urban green space. The majority of these lands have been assessed as having high or medium environmental value. McCarthy Woods is one of the highest valued environmental areas in Ottawa, given its eco-diversity, connectivity to other green spaces and large scale. The development reserve zoning would affect about 103 hectares or 150 football fields of ecologically valuable green space, likely including over 1 million mature native plants and hundreds of thousands of trees. With regards to what we call McCarthy Woods, I think there's a little bit of difference between what the NCC is calling the McCarthy Woods and what the city called McCarthy Woods in this study, which valued it as highly valuable. It's that area that you see in 144. That is McCarthy Woods and includes the meadows. So this distinction that the NCC is making now of separating the woods and meadows is just a recent distinction and almost like a communications ploy, so that they can say that they're protecting McCarthy Woods while they only actually protect a third of it. Losing these green spaces would jeopardize the city's ability to meet its 40% green tree canopy targets in its official plan, and Canada's commitment to protect 30% of its lands and 30% of its oceans by 2050. It is also inconsistent with Canada's National Adaptation Strategy and Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act, as well as the city's Climate Change Master Plan, which recognizes natural areas as core infrastructure for cooling, air quality, carbon storage, and climate resilience. And it's contrary to the spirit of the city's equity inclusion lens by reducing green spaces in close proximity to affordable housing in this diverse area of the city, including 3 family-oriented Ottawa community housing and co-op communities that back onto these green spaces, and 5 more within a 20-minute walking distance. They also provide a variety of ecosystem services, such as helping us address and adapt to climate change, improve air quality, and provide habitat for wildlife. The local forests help protect our homes from flooding and extreme weather such as hurricanes. The ecosystem services provided by urban forests are more than twice as high as those provided by rural forests, at over $9,000 per hectare per year, according to a study on the natural capital conducted by the David Suzuki Foundation in partnership with the NCC. Oops, sorry. But these green spaces are frequently enjoyed by families and dog walkers like us, having leisurely strolls, and young people and seniors finding refuge. It is well documented that trees help us live longer, healthier lives by offering mood and health benefits similar to getting a $10,000 raise or being 7 years younger. I know, and they want to take this away from us. An increased greenness lowers the risk of mortality from common causes to up to 12%. The mental health benefits of green spaces has been documented in over 250 studies, such as reduced anxiety, pain, and stress, improved mood, energy, and quality of sleep. So I feel we owe it to ourselves and future generations to keep protecting these green spaces by reverting to protective zoning. Governments should not rush into a major decision like this without doing their homework and working transparently with communities to determine the best long-term uses of public lands.
Thank you, Mireille. I'm going to invite John Sankey to speak because John is a longtime resident and a naturalist, among many other qualifications. I can't list them all, but if ever you want to find out how interesting this person is, go to his website. John Sankey, I think, at ncf.ca, I think. Okay, so John, if you want to go to the, would you like to have a seat right here? Yes, please. And John is going to give his perspective about this very part of land, but if you could just face.
Okay, hi. I'm a naturalist. I'm not a lawyer or a bureaucrat. So I'm going to talk about why the meadow part of our green space is so important to us. Practically everything we grow, apart from green crops, depends on insects to pollinate. And insects over the last 30 years have done a precipitous decline. We're talking about 1/5 as many as there were 30 years ago. So it's very important to us to do everything we can to encourage insects in our community. An acre of meadow holds 10 times as many insects as an acre of woods. And so we need to stop saying protect the woods and forget about those weeds. And we have to turn it around and say that the meadow is the most important part ecologically for us in this fight. And so I hope that every chance you get, you'll tell people we want the meadow to be preserved and enhanced, rather than always assuming that the woods is the only valuable thing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. Next, we've got Bernie Muncaster. Is Bernie here? Oh, very good, thank you. Bernie is the principal of Muncaster Environmental Planning, and he's got his master's in science and over 35 years has been providing natural environment consulting services in Eastern Ontario. Bernie did his undergrad at the University of Guelph, where he obtained a Bachelor of Science with honors in biology and a minor in economics. Bernie completed a Master of Science in biology at the Great Lakes Institute. That's at the University of Windsor, I didn't know that. With his thesis on factors influencing the uptake of organic chemicals by freshwater mussels. Interesting. Together with Dan Brunton, Bernie produced the Urban Natural Areas Environmental Evaluation Study, which initially examined over 2,000 urban natural areas, resulting in assessments of 200 areas that were grouped into levels of ecological significance based on 9 evaluation criteria. Let's hear about what you have to offer. Thank you, Bernie.
Good afternoon. Bear with me because I didn't realize it was like 22 years ago that Dan and I did a lot of this work. But I'll just start off, maybe talk about the evaluation criteria, and if it gets to whatever technical, just let me know. But so, as indicated, we had 9 evaluation criteria, and they were very heavily towards the ecological features and functions. So we didn't look at social use, we didn't look at economic values directly. But so we looked at things like connectivity, which is an important one, of course, what we're talking about today with the Southern Corridor. We looked at the habitat maturity, the size and the shape of the natural area. So, you know, irregular shapes generally have more fragmentation and more influence from disturbances and non-native species and that type of thing. We looked at the regeneration features, principally from the woody vegetation that were going on, and also the what else? What am I going to say here? And the communities that are present, the what we call the floral representation. So, you know, are the plants dominated by non-native species, or are there a lot of native species that have really high what we call coefficients of conservatism? Plants that are generally sensitive to features and not widely distributed. So we took those 9 criteria, and then each urban natural area was assigned a score of 1 to 5 for each of those evaluation criteria. And we sum those and divide those by 9 to get a score, kind of in quotation marks, for the natural area. So maybe I'll just go through the ones that we're talking about today briefly, and we can give you some highlights. So we'll start off with McCarthy Woods, and what's important here too is that the official name of the urban natural area is McCarthy Woods and Southern Corridor, which you'll see differs from most of them, most of the natural areas that we look at. So as we've talked about, we included the meadows as well. So the average score out of 5 for the evaluation criteria for them was 4.11. So that's a high score. That was the 7th highest score that we had through all the urban natural areas that we assessed. And any scores greater than 3, greater than 3.2, we assigned a high evaluation. So not only is it highly ranked, it's high in amongst those natural areas that were ranked as high. And then for the other one, so let's go on the right then for 143, and this is the CNR line woods. And this one didn't score as well. This one scored an average rating of 2.22, and so it was considered medium. Any of the natural areas that scored 2 or greater, so between 2 or greater and 3.2, were considered medium. And this is at the low end of medium. So this is one that, and I know there's been some talk that I've seen in emails and that about maybe looking at this one again, because it didn't really score that well for quite a large natural area. So like it only scored above average for 2 of the 9 evaluation criteria. So that's something that, as I say, this data, even though our reports were having 2005 data on them, the data was actually collected, and Dan Brunton collected the bulk of the data. I want to mention Dan's name a couple times, in 2002. So certainly it was a while ago, and that one could bear having another look at. The last one that we looked at was the Leopold Woodlot over in the west there against Vito, and then comparing that to the CNR line one. So it scored higher. It scored an average of 2.33, even though it's a much smaller natural area. But it scored well for the regeneration, the habitat maturity, and the wildlife habitat, as any of you that read in there would recognize there. What else can I guess we'll have questions later.
Well, actually, if I could borrow the mic again.
Sure.
I have a question.
Okay,
Brace yourself. Here we go. Bernie,
Yes.
can you tell me what makes the 3 urban natural areas in the McCarthy Woods and Southern Corridor valuable from an environmental perspective?
Sure.
I've got one more.
Oh, no? Okay. Well, you'll probably want to wait and see how I do with this one before you ask me another one. Okay, so maybe what I'll do is I'll go through each one and let you know the criteria that they scored high from 9. So McCarthy Woods then, of course, it had lots. Actually, 5 out of the 9 evaluation criteria, it scored the highest possible. So the first one is no surprise, connectivity, size and shape as well. I mean, it's a big urban natural area when we can include the Southern Corridor. Habitat maturity, we all know about the maturity of the woods. Significant flora and fauna and wildlife habitat. That gets into the whole question of the meadows, providing the insect habitats we've heard, and providing habitat for raptor utilization and winter raptors and that type of thing. In contrast to those 5, so the CNR, the one to the east on the right there of our map there, it scored only above average, as I say, for connectivity, still in the Southern Corridor, and for size and shape. So it had a high level of disturbance, it had a low habitat maturity, and very few significant flora and fauna were found in it. And the last one, Leopold, then, so it scored above average for regeneration. So that's the regeneration of the understory of the lower canopies in the wooded areas as well. It scored average for 4 other evaluation criteria: connectivity, disturbance, habitat maturity, and wildlife habitat.
That's helpful, but I still have one more question. So Bernie, what would happen to the environmental quality of the small part of McCarthy Woods that the NCC proposes to keep protecting if the remainder were to be developed?
Excellent question, because so often, and we've already heard this today, right? And I found this over my decades of being an environmental consultant, right? The wetlands, rightfully so, take top billing, and I'm sure woodlot right there as well. But the meadows don't get the respect, and so often I've gone towards agriculture, which I understand the need for that, or for development. So without those supporting meadows, then we've already heard, not only don't we have the insect reduction, we don't, and then the rodents that raptors will be utilizing, and that you know, apart from that is the great you know, nature enjoyment utilization that we get out of the meadows habitat as well.
Thank you so much, Bernie. Thank you. And Mr. Sankey, I actually have a question for you. Could you please let all of us in this room know exactly what is considered, or where are the McCarthy Meadows in relation to McCarthy Road, for instance? Could you just let everyone in on that? Oh. The expert.
Oh, you're using the map. Okay, sorry, now you're walking behind here.
This is what we call awkward.
The meadow is here and there. Everywhere you don't see the forest is meadow. It's about 80% of the total area.
Thanks so much, John. And we are going to continue now with Jakob Mueller and Owen Clarkin, who are from the Ottawa Field Naturalist Club. Is Jakob here? Ah, yes, good. Jakob is an experienced field naturalist with a particular interest in ecology and conservation, interested in all flora and fauna. Jakob is especially passionate about botany and herpetology. I had to look that up. Amphibians, reptiles. Jakob moved to Ottawa in 2012 and joined the Ottawa Field Naturalist Club in 2013. He is currently the past president of the organization and the chair of the Conservation Committee. Meanwhile, Owen Clarkin is a lifelong naturalist who has resided in Eastern Ontario his whole life, interested in all aspects of nature with a special focus on botany, biogeography, conservation, particularly of uncommon species, and monitoring the spread of exotic invasives. Owen is the current president and events committee chair of the Ottawa Field Naturalist Club and was the chair of the Conservation Committee from 2014 to 2024. Gentlemen, welcome. Fight over the mic.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'll quickly go first on some details, and I'll hand it over to Jakob, probably more for like the big picture side. We won't take too long. You already have the basic idea from what you're hearing today. I'll maybe just add some additional context. So we've been going to the McCarthy Woods for many, many years because I'm not from this part of Ottawa, right? I grew up in the area. But as soon as I first saw it, it was very obvious that the mature woods that is famously being talked about today, very, very high quality. I would say it's the highest quality, upland to mesic, sort of middle wet or dry forest in the region inside the Greenbelt. Okay, like just it's the highest quality forest inside the city of Ottawa, like forest. Okay, you take the corridor beside it, the valley goes much, much higher again. That includes the meadows, the wetlands, the younger forests that score low value, which are becoming more mature. 2002 was, what, 24 years ago? They've gotten a quarter of a century more mature since then, right? Just think about that too. Also, the biodiversity in there, through repeated visits of a lot of naturalists, we know that it already scored 5, if I heard correctly, on the 2002 to 2005 assessment. There's a lot of additional biodiversity that was not known then, such as only site in Ottawa that has leatherwood, large colony of bladdernut, the only upland example of a mature hackberry. I could go on. It's huge, hugely impressive. We hosted the Field Botanist of Ontario in Ottawa in 2024. We chose McCarthy Woods as the example to show the dignitaries who were visiting of a wooded area. Let's go to McCarthy Woods, and we chose it because it's so high quality, right? So these are the kind of ideas we're getting at. If you're to lose this non-core forest habitats, this many hectares of habitats, I can tell you what's going to happen. You already heard what's going to happen, but I'll give you another example to think about. We have close associations with the McNamara Field Naturalist Club in Arnprior. When you talk to them, they famously have Gillies Grove, tallest tree in Ontario, old growth forest that never cut down. The entire McNamara Club basically goes to a different place in Arnprior that is more connected, called McNamara Trail on the east side of town. Not old growth, but they focus on that because it's got connectivity, it's mature, blah, 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 all this stuff. The Gillies Grove is looked at kind of as a dog walking place. Even though it has all these old growth features, it's surrounded by town, it's being encroached on, it's getting full of invasive species, it's degrading over time. I'll hand over to Jakob to give his thoughts too.
You can use that mic here, actually.
This goes over. Okay. That works? Okay. All right. Yeah, so as I was saying, like, the value of McCarthy Woods, the biodiversity and the ecological integrity and its intactness it's directly related to the rest of the southern corridor. It's directly related to the meadows and that connectivity, and the fact that it's in this large parcel of intact, natural or almost natural lands, right? Like, it's not, these things don't exist in vacuums, they don't exist in isolation, they're interrelated in all kinds of ways. And the most troubling thing in some of the NCC's latest literature is referring to this as underutilized. What the heck does that even mean? Because when something has ecological function, when something has ecological value as natural habitat, that is its purpose. You can't call that underutilized. You know, just, we need spaces like that. We already don't have enough spaces like that, and many of the spaces that we do have don't even come close to the ecological integrity of this one. You know, we need to keep this thing whole for long-term sustainability. If what is now being called McCarthy Woods without the meadows is all that's left, and it's hemmed in by hastily planned development that none of us want to see, you know, if it's just hemmed in by tinderbox 5-minute condos, what's going to happen? Everyone's going to be concentrated in there. We won't have all of the value from the habitats adjacent to it, and it's just going to be a rain of seeds of invasive species. Wildlife won't be able to go back and forth, and over time, the big trees will come down, and what's going to come up in its place? Invasive stuff. You know, slowly you'll start to lose the species. The plant species will go down, the animal species will go down, and without intervention and management, you'll have a thicket of shrubs and invasive trees, and it won't be what it was. And that'd be a shame, and there's absolutely no need for that to occur. We have it in our control and in our power right now to change that outcome. And so, you know, I don't live in this neighborhood either, but I know a bad idea when I see one. And so don't let anyone who is opposing your opposition to this, don't let anyone call you a NIMBY. That'd be my big takeaway. People will throw that out now like it's nothing. Like, oh, you don't like something that's happening, you're a NIMBY. No.
That's not in my backyard.
Yeah, it's an acronym. It's become pejorative to say not people who object to anything, but that's nonsense. You're members of this community. You deserve, in a democratic society, in a wealthy society like Canada, we can do better than this. And you deserve to have a say in what our children's future looks like in this community. So don't accept that.
You know what? I love how convincing naturalists are. I'm going to ask you to just hold the questions. I know it's hard to, but we're going to move on. And our next panelist is Angela Keller-Herzog, who is the founding executive director of Community Action for Environmental Sustainability, otherwise known by the acronym CAFES, an environmental network and nonprofit organization local to Ottawa. Cafes advocates for climate and environmental sustainability, supports local action, and builds community. Angela is very active in the community as an environmental and social justice advocate and active citizen observer of municipal affairs. She is a trained economist with over 2 decades of experience in economic consulting, program management, policy development, risk management, and international development. Why am I feeling so small up here? Here's Angela.
Thank you very much, Christine. So it's interesting to go after all the other speakers who have shared information. And I'm going to try to kind of navigate around that and not repeat. So cafes is an environment and climate network, and a big part of what we do is a municipal watch. So we keep our eyes on all the different committees and all the different plans and processes of the city, because, I mean, who has time to do all that? We arguably have not yet acquired very much like watchdog expertise on watching the NCC. So we should build that practice over time. And we are a membership-based organization, so that we try to support the positive initiatives of our members, and then also support when there is the need for like resistance and fight back. And we rely on our members really to pop up the issues, so that if there is an alert necessary, we can amplify that. We can see, oh, what's going on there? And I should tell you that the Hunt Club Community Association and OSEAN have done a really good job of documenting and explaining what's going on here, right? This like sneak up on this area process that has happened under the sort of cover of the comprehensive zoning bylaw process, which we've been following for like 2-3 years now, right? And before that was the official plan, like Riley explained. So first of all, good on you, local organizations. When this was flagged, we also discussed it with Jeff Leeper, the chair of the Planning and Housing Committee. And I think that Riley has done a really good job of trying to push back and sort of build support. One of the things that we need to be on the lookout for is backroom dealing, right? When suddenly somebody has like a great idea over lunch, and then boom, 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 there is like total shortcuts taken on proper process. And it looks like this was happening here a bit. And there are things that are valid, right? We want to be building more affordable housing. We want to be building a compact rather than a sprawling city. Sure, right? But we still are trying to build a livable city, and that includes, I would say, also habitat for other creatures, including the insects, which are getting a good amount of coverage in this meeting. So I think that we need to be looking out for like positive solutions. So one of the things that Jeff Leeper said is like, if you can find like trade-offs, are there other brownfield federal lands that could be used for housing, for example? And in terms of the comment on the NIMBY front, I think that yes, it's true, often neighborhoods don't want change, and sometimes there's change which will reduce the value of your properties. But there are other arguments in this case, I think, and we've really heard some very good presentations, that these lands are really, really worthwhile to save and not to have them like nibbled away at. So Cafes is going to try to help mobilize support, not just in this neighborhood where you are, but also spread the information more widely. In terms of, and my time is probably ticking.
You're 4 minutes and something.
Okay, so next I'm gonna go to this, well, what can we do, right? And the Cafes Network has a function to try to help people who have energy to do something. And similarly, I think that the great briefing materials that Andrei, Christine, Marianne have produced can help you write letters. And I've heard that for a member of parliament, when they get like an individual personalized letter, and it doesn't even have to be grammatically correct, like they think that's equivalent to like 1,000 people who care about this issue. And even if that's an exaggeration, so let's scale it down, if it's just like 500, if every person in this room started writing letters, like that actually has a lot of impact, right? And a person that hasn't been mentioned yet is the mayor, right? So we have municipal elections coming up this year. So I think we should be writing to the MPs. I think we should write to the mayor. I think that if you can write either a handwritten letter, I know that's very old-fashioned, or an email, but use your own words, right? And say, this is why this matters. And there's enough briefing materials that you can draw on. You don't need to be the world's greatest expert. So and I think those pushbacks are really important. And we certainly have noticed that the local politicians have been listening more closely with the approach of the municipal election. So the Cafes Network, we're finding we have more access to the mayor's office. They want to meet with us now, where there was 2 years where they didn't really answer the mail. So together, pushing on all these levers, I think that we really can make a difference. And then in terms of pushback, and then if smart people like Riley can also try to see about sometimes we can do land swaps, sometimes like other spots for development could be identified that would have less ecological and environmental value. So being open to also finding positive solutions, that's also a big part of building a more livable and a good city.
Thank you so much. And, you know what? I think that was the best definition for political action. Well done. Well done. Next we have Paul Johannes from Greenspace Alliance. And Paul has worked in a variety of roles and functions over a 37-year career in the federal public service, ending his career as Assistant Chief Statistician of Canada, Corporate Services. And throughout, his strengths were recognized in communication, group facilitation, stakeholder engagement, leadership, innovation, and conceptual activity. He holds a master's degree in public administration from l'École nationale d'administration publique, sounds like France to me, and a PhD in public policy from the School of Public Administration at Carleton University. Since his retirement in 2008, he has been involved in various City of Ottawa planning files and issues in the defense of Greenspace. First as a private resident, then as a member of the Greenspace Alliance. He has served as chair of the Greenspace Alliance since 2018, and in 2024, he also assumed the role of chair of the Federation of Citizens Associations of Ottawa. Paul, over to you. Thank you.
Who's the tall person that was before me here? So I was going to use this mic because I gesticulate quite a lot. So when I speak, I guess I have to handheld it now. So I'm going to speak on behalf of the Greenspace Alliance, but from a 30,000 foot kind of perspective, looking down at this whole area. And what's at issue today really are 2 blocks of land. When we go back and look at where these lands fit, they're really part of a whole chain of green spaces that make their way all the way from sort of Britannia and Mud Lake to the west, down the Pinecrest Creek corridor, as far as Tallwood, I'm going to call it Tallwood Forest, but the actual real name is Tallwood Woods. It doesn't sound right, but anyways, there's, and that's sort of at the, that's at Woodruff and the city archive building right there. Then it goes east along the Woodruff-Merivale corridor, which is one of the pieces that are at issue today. That is, then it crosses Merivale, and now it follows the Nepean Creek corridor all the way to the Rideau River. And then you get to the Rideau River, well, you're kind of stuck there, but it would be good if the NCC was thinking about this as a whole big piece, that maybe we need a pedestrian crossing right there, because that would take us right across the river to here, to this community.
And there's a big bridge already shown there.
So there's infrastructure there already. And then that corridor continues through the Hunt Club corridor that we've just been, I mean, the McCarthy Woods corridor that we just heard everything about, to the Airport Parkway, across the Parkway, across Bank Street, continues on the other side, down a whole series of connected trails and parks all through Alta Vista, all the way down to the hospital, all the way to Ferdinand Hub, and from there down the Rideau River, all the way to the Ottawa River again, to McKay Lake, and then it ends that whole long corridor sort of at Beechwood Cemetery. That's one huge piece of green space that's all interconnected. Really, it's kind of an inner green belt. We have an outer green belt, but this is really an inner green belt. And it has the greenness, it has the recreational, the ecological, all of the words that we've heard, but spread throughout this whole geography. And it, sort of by happenstance in a way, if you look at the city's new official plan, it connects up many of the hubs, many of the places where there's going to be ever more population as a result of the growth. What we need is green space for that population. We need homes, but we need green space access there as well. Having this inner green belt is a project I think that the NCC should step back and look at, sort of at the big picture. Think big. I thought the Prime Minister told us to think big. So maybe create and support a whole inner green belt, which would include these two parcels. But that being the vision, maybe that's where we want to go with this thing. So that's really, I just wanted to drop that idea there, because we're going to be, you know, of course, we're fighting with all of our partners and all the communities here to try and ensure that we get by this hurdle, which is just City Council meeting at the end of this month, where we only need 2 votes to actually have it adopt the recommendation that was put forward by Joint Committee. That's the immediate target. But really we need to be thinking long term. How can we really make this full network of green spaces into a reality that it's on the ground now, but it's not recognized, it's not protected, it's not looked after. So that's my
Thank you, Paul. I like that, the big picture, yeah. Get it in your mind. We have, last but not least, Ben Glossop and Jane Moore from the Poets Pathway. Ben is the principal bassoonist of the Ottawa and Kingston Symphony Orchestras and is an extra with the National Arts Centre Orchestra. He also plays with the Bel Canto Wind Quintet, the Prisme Ensemble, and the Iorama Wind Quintet. He is a composer and singer-songwriter and recently released the album, Fever Lines. Ben also enjoys bringing engaging music to people with exceptionalities at the Lotus Center for Special Music and at the National Arts Center. And Jane, Jane is the mother of 3 and the grandmother of 4. She taught English, creative writing, and theater for 38 years. At Laurentian High School and then Canterbury High School, she founded the Literary Arts program at Canterbury. She was the coach of 10 national champion BOFA teams in the National Improv Games and has been the chair of the Poets Pathway since 2007. Poet friends?
Hi everybody. So about the Poets Pathway. The Poets Pathway is a tribute, a monument, and a love letter to Canada, its history, its culture, especially its land, to its lands. 37 kilometers long. It stretches from Britannia Beach to Beechwood Cemetery, as you saw on the map. It goes through that land, all those lands. Sir Johnny MacDonald, at the beginning of Canada, chose poets as communicators for their skills, both French and English, for many positions in the civil service. Lots of poets brought lots from Quebec to Ottawa. Ottawa really has always been full of poets. 3 poets in particular eventually became the Confederation poets, 3 of the 5, and they lived in Ottawa. They are Archibald Lampman, William Wilfred Campbell, and Duncan Campbell Scott. They spent a great deal of time outside, loving the land, and writing about it, including the meadows, the wildlife, the trees, the insects, the birds. They consciously chose and tried to create a national Canadian voice, and they succeeded. They succeeded amazingly. I'm condensing a lot. They even wrote a column at the Globe for years together. Poetry was very popular in those times. It was a major source of entertainment. And these poets were really rock stars of their time. They had large audiences. They were known in the States, where they sometimes traveled, and in Europe. They were published in magazines and journals, literary journals as well, and Harper's Bazaar and Atlantic Monthly. They were visited by other poets from Europe. They were very influential and esteemed by not just the public, where they would do entertainment. For example, Pauline Johnson, a friend and represented at her first plaque, would do half her show dressed as a proper, beautiful English lady with parasol and all, and the second half dressed as an Aboriginal maiden. And it was showtime. It was wonderful, very popular.
Her funeral in Vancouver was the largest funeral ever seen in that city.
And she came to Ottawa a lot. Her family was in not Vancouver. That was a center of soirees. Lots was going on socially for these poets as well. They were really part of the life of and creating the cultural life of Ottawa. I just mentioned briefly 2 poets who are not part of the Confederation Poets on the Pathway are well known probably. Darcy McGee, the father of Confederation, was a poet. He was assassinated on Spark Street one dark night as he came home from Parliament buildings. And William Pittman Lett was the first clerk of the city of Ottawa, known for many deeds, including refereeing hockey. But he wrote the letter to Queen Victoria asking her to make Ottawa the capital of Canada. And both of them have their plaques here, one of their poems. I also want to talk about the importance of McCarthy Woods to the Poets Pathway. The woods themselves, as you saw, are the physical center of the pathway. And we call it a necklace, if you remember the shape that you saw on the screen. Ben began his mapping of that pathway in about 2007, 2008 with GPS and bicycle. That was the start of what you saw there. A couple of stories. Bill Royds, who lived just down the road on McCarthy, was snowshoeing in McCarthy Woods one day, and glimpsing far off buildings, presumably the Parliament buildings. He remembered a poem he had studied in high school and loved. It was Winter Uplands by Archibald Lampman. You may not know it by title, you may know some of the lines. It made Bill, though, imagine something amazing. Poems about the land, on the land. And so he thought of Pathway, and he went searching. He found Greenspace Alliance, and he found Erwin Dreesen, and that was the beginning of the Poet's Pathway. Leaving out Poets Hill and moving on. A second story is of Lampman and the poem, Winter Uplands. Lampman had was physically frail. He had had rheumatic fever as a child, and he pushed himself always, trying to get over it, I guess. He had a weak heart. Anyway, he was always an outdoorsman, canoeing and camping and walking miles and miles and miles and writing, resting on the ground, writing about tiny flowers. But he sat through a snowstorm in front of a hill writing this poem, Winter Uplands, as the snow filled up the woods. He came home, and 9 days later he was dead of pneumonia at the age of 37. And he is now lying in Beechwood Cemetery near his memorial to his little son, 6 months old, who died 5 years before him. And Lampman's poem in Beechwood Cemetery is nearby now on a plaque. Two more notes. This entrance to McCarthy Woods is the site of our first success. It took 3 years. It was very difficult to get the pathway going. It took 3 years talking to Marianne McCrae and the NCC and getting what we needed to have the okay to put our first plaque here. Of course, our plaque was Winter Uplands. That day in 2010, Councillor Marianne McCrae, Councillor and poet Clive Doucette, who helped us so much, and Rhoda Bellamy, the wife of Bill Royds, who so sadly had passed away before, all spoke at that unveiling under a massive, beautiful maple tree that used to be right there such a short time ago at the entrance to the woods. It was rainy. We were jubilant. The last note about this area, the meadows, the woods, is of our poetry competition that we had for the Sesquid Centennial in 2017. We were celebrating and attempting to end the pathway then. We held a poetry competition, our biggest yet, this one, for published poets, and the one rule that really mattered was that their entry or entries somehow touched on the poem already there, the Winter Uplands poem. We received many wonderful entries, and we published a small book, which I have here, the Lampman Challenge, which is now in the National Archives. So we planned that this end in 2017. Of course, it's not over, and then we worked a lot for years trying to save the home and lands of Campbell through the pandemic. The last plaque was unveiled in 2017. The pathway, made of granite and bronze and dreams, is out there. We thought our monument would last forever. Maybe it will.
If I could just add briefly that this is, it's very sad to think that our Prime Minister would stand and unveil his plan to solve our housing crisis on the Poets Pathway, a space that speaks to our national voice at this time in our history. It's shocking, it's nearsighted mostly, and I hope that some of the people in this room can help our politicians see the light.
to a conclusion. Thank you so much, Jane and Ben. You know, having listened to naturalists, environmentalists, political advocates, economists, entrepreneurs, poets, musicians, isn't that what community is? I feel like this is a typical Canadian moment. And here we are, engaged in something that's important to us. We're here because we want to speak as a united voice to protect land that is important to our environmental sustainability. We still want housing for everybody. Of course we do. And we are building it. We absolutely are. But one does not preclude the other. And before I ask for people who have questions, I'm going to invite everybody to stand because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's got a bit of a numb bum going on. So may I please invite you to stand up and just do a few stretches.
How about a standing ovation for the panel?
I was about to say that too. Okay, that was brief, and I see a first hand up, and what I'm going to do, so hands up, as I see them, I am about to record. So let me say, I saw Michael first. If I don't know your name, I'm going to write what you're wearing, and short hair. I see navy shirt, and I see Irwin. You see, I know some of you, which is kind of handy. I see Irwin, I see first row, left and right ends, okay. I see black vest and striped. I see red and white striped. Oh boy, you're going to recognize your description because I'm counting on it. I see John D. Reed and I see Christophe. Christophe. I see purple mask. Christophe, purple mask. Oh, did I get purple mask? Yes, purple mask. I see Noella. Oh boy, okay, we've got our speaking order, so sit tight everybody. And please come up to the mic so everybody can hear you. Please ask your question, and Councillor Brockington has let me know if you have questions for him. He's got a hard departure time of 3 o'clock, so he's just going to be here for another 25 minutes. Michael Horabay, go ahead, please.
Thank you. The microphone's at a perfect level for me. I would just like to commend everyone who's here, participating everyone. And I want to just add one little thing because I think Angela was mentioning about writing to your members of parliament, just to inform them of what's going on in the community because they don't spend very much time here. But if you're going to all that trouble, please, if it's an email you're writing, please CC it to all the media outlets around Ottawa, CBC, Citizens, CFRA, CTV, etc., for a couple of reasons. Some of them have reported on the issue, but beyond that, there's some that have not reported on the issue yet. And I always think it's helpful that the community is sharing their opinion and their concerns of their MP with the media, because it's just a way, Riley has stated it, there's a bit of a brick wall around here. He does everything he can as a councillor, has been for years, trying to get engagement with the MPs, and there's two of them here. There's Ottawa Centre, Ottawa South, and they're not really engaging very much, and this is a federal issue. So as I say, if you're taking all the time to write your letter, CC it to all the media outlets. It's not hard to find their press release emails. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please, if you are standing, you will find your seats. Do not be shy. It's hot. We don't want anybody passing out, so please take a seat if you'd like one. Come and find somebody in a green shirt and we'll find your seat.
Navy shirt is next.
Hi, my name is Matka Sedlar. I've been living in the community since 61. So I have watched it grow, and I mean really grow. And I live on Linton Road, so I back onto the NCC. Okay, so we do have a little forest there. We used to build forts there, and we used to have deer back there. Now we don't have any more deer, so that's gone. And where the quarry is up here, that used to be a quarry with water. We used to go swimming there and had great time. And I watched all the housing being built and watched all the green space going. We used to have cows behind our house, and that all disappeared. So I've watched everything being grown up since I was a little kid. And I saw things just slowly disappear. And now they're saying they want to get rid of McCarthy Woods and Meadow. Come on, let's not destroy what we have. We've already destroyed so much, you know. I watched even Moody's Bay changing, and then, you know, there was no hill there. That was built, that's man-made, and so on. So it has changed so much. You know, I was only a little kid, but I remember everything changing. So yes, like the gentleman said, you know, Mr. Borbe said, right, stand up for our community. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. And yes, blue shirt. Erwin, you're next after.
My name is actually Peter Van Roon, and I actually live in that quarry right now, so I'm one of the bad guys. So many really good and very engaging speakers today. Thank you. I've got a job to do when I get home in just reviewing everything that I heard, and it's going to be a real problem if I don't have access to some of the slides that are up there. Can you let us know where we can get those?
Yes.
Okay,
We
thank you.
can make them available through OSEAN.
Wonderful, thank you.
We can make them available through OSEAN.
Great.
Their website.
Perfect. And our environmental, I believe it's John. You mentioned that the metals could use some enhancing. What do you mean by that?
Well, primarily adding the...
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on spot there.
We need to go through the meadow and look for plants that attract insects of various kinds that aren't there and add them. Because the place used to be farmed, and there's still a huge amount of two separate grain crops that are covering it. And the other thing that we could use would be about every 100 meters to have a conifer that would give shelter to birds and a rotating shade for insects to enrich the environment. As long as you only make it about one every 100 meters, not more.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. That's it for me.
Okay, thanks for your question. And Erwin, please.
Yeah, it was of course a good thing to see at the committee the motion by Riley approved 11-4, but the disappointing thing to me was that one of the four was the chair of a planning and housing committee. So my question to Riley is, have you had conversations with Councillor Lieber since, and what are the prospects of having him change his view?
Not putting you on the spot.
So thank you, Erwin. Erwin and I go back many years, decades to the 90s, and although he doesn't live in Riverside Park anymore, certainly appreciate a lifelong contribution to our community, so thank you, Erwin. Councillor Jeff Leeper, who's unofficially running for mayor, challenging Mark Sutcliffe this coming election. Glenn Gower, Stittsville, Wilson Lowe, Barhaven East, and Laura Dudas were the four voting against. This was not a council meeting, a joint meeting of planning and housing Agriculture, Rural Affairs. I have met with Jeff Leeper. Jeff will not be taking any further action at the council meeting. He will not be moving a motion. He said, I said my bit. The committee has taken a position, and I'm going to respect the decision of that committee. Councillor Leeper believes that we have an obligation to make lands available for housing purposes when we have declared an emergency in Ottawa and where the need across this country is as high as it is. But to every other point, just in River Ward, there are about 8,000 units approved, not built. Every community is doing its part. Hunt Club Association did not push back. They endorsed the St. Mary's proposal at Riverside and Bank. They endorsed Tudor Hall. We've seen the Shearwater and Ashgrove OCH communities build. You look at Riverside Park, major developments in the Mooney's Bay area, probably 2,000, 2,500 more units. The docks at Mooney's Bay, the Reveille on Brookfield, Burgil Towers that's coming in on Ridgewood, Norbury Residence is going to expand, and you've got all of the Confederation Heights Master Plan, all the federal complex there over the next 25 years, a brand new neighborhood, up to 22,000 people, potentially with office, retail, and residential. And so what we're saying is you can welcome new neighbors into your neighborhood, like what we've been doing in Riverside Park and Hunt Club, and respect and protect ecologically sound lands. You can do both. And we're not the bad guys, because we're the local people standing up and say, hey, we want to explain to you what value there is, and bring in experts that say, we absolutely need to have this balance. And that is the right thing to do, and it's the right stand to take. And so far, from a city perspective, we won the first battle, comes to council. But even if this passes, the NCC in writing says we're going to do it anyway. We're still going to do it, with you or without you. And that's why when we have people writing to the NCC and our MPs, leveraging the support we can get from our MPs and other MPs, is say, listen, NCC, you've got lots of land, meeting housing targets in this city, and doesn't necessarily have to use this. Building the Rockcliffe base, or looking at the old lands on Heron Road, the old St. Pat's on Heron, there are many other pockets, let alone all the privately owned land. All along the Carling corridor, Maryville and Carlington, thousands and thousands of units the city has already greenlit that we're waiting private developers to build. So we've done our bit. So I don't think the chair is going to do anything new. We just have to get others up to speed who weren't on the joint committee, which I'm doing, and making sure that there are any surprise motions. I've met with the mayor as well and others, but we'll continue to do work. The other bit that we haven't talked about, this was actually a joint motion, Councillor Lane Johnson in College Ward. There's another piece of land we're trying to save. So we've collaborated together. I want to mention her name as well, but it's been a joint effort on our parts to convince our colleagues on City Council this is the right stand to take.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Erin, for your question. Just as I'm waiting for the next person, oh, she's coming, but are we all hearing it? Write a letter. MP, NCC, write a letter. Personal is best, not a form letter. Go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Abigail Tilden. I moved here 2.5 years ago with my wife, who's volunteering in the back. My question is regarding the usage citation from the NCC that the space is not being properly utilized. And to be clear, I'm very much in agreement with what these gentlemen said, that the utilization of this land is a natural function. But I'm curious what statistics they're using, what their metrics are, and if they release that, and if there's a way that that can be countered by providing some sort of census numbers to them about how we are using it, and countering that claim of theirs with actual numbers that they can no longer dispute.
Wonderful question. We have kind of been wanting to know the data that they have been used as well to get to that answer. We have not been able to find it, and because we haven't been actually able to engage with the NCC, they haven't shared that with us. We would like to do kind of our own information survey. So when you go home, there's another, besides writing the letter, go to our email, our website to get some tips, and besides writing the letter, We also want you to share any of your data. So if you're on Strava, if you're on Map My Ride, if you're on Google whatever, we're gonna try to get OSEAN to be like your friend. You can share your information with your friend. An iNaturalist, okay? Because whenever you guys share that stuff or you post it there, we can gather that information and then we can go to the NCC and say, look, there was 5,000 people there just in December. How are you saying that this is underutilized? And so we also are gonna try to have like QR codes, and this is where we could use your help too. So all of the entrances to these areas, we wanna put up signs that say, hey, are you visiting this? Here, just scan this code and say, I'm here, and tell us your postal code. Because NCC is probably not gonna share that data with us if that data actually exists. I think they're saying it's underutilized from them, because they haven't put up any map signs, any trails. The only signs you can find is watch out for coyotes, right? That's not really that welcoming, but despite that, we are still utilizing that land. And as we said, our four-legged, two-legged, winged creatures are also utilizing that land.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Marianne. That is so brilliant.
We're in England. I live about 3 houses away from where Owen's going to take a walk at 3 o'clock or so. My question is to you, Riley, and you've addressed it a couple of times. The fact that you worked so hard to get the zoning hopefully back to where a better position than it is now, but the NCC might ignore that. So, what can the city of Ottawa do to prevent that, or if anything?
Thank you. The challenge is on federal land, they basically have a green light. The two parties try and work together as best as possible, including for zoning purposes. And ultimately, we could have a conversation well before a decision's taken saying, you know, what is, even Toby Nussbaum to my face says, we have no plans to develop at this time. We just want to set the table and make sure that zoning that comes out of the comprehensive zoning bylaw review aligns with the official plan. And as Andrei says, it basically brings them to the 1 yard line. So when they are ready to sell land or to facilitate development, they're closer to what they have to do. What I've said is, listen, my motion does not handcuff these lands from future development. It doesn't stop it. It doesn't add any new steps. It doesn't cost them any more money. But what it does do is it provides a public process that will be followed if and when the day comes that they want to sell the land to a private entity who wants to develop it, or they want to facilitate and put something on there that they're not currently allowed to do. So the whole reason why we have a planning committee is people want to do something with their land that they're not permitted to do. We file a zoning bylaw exemption application. That's what people are very concerned about, that this hasn't been transparent. They've used a city process to come in the back door. And why, again, as I said in my intro, why would they not agree to even sit down with the local councillor and have a conversation, right? There might be some lands that the public would be willing to at least have a conversation on, potentially. The corridor along the river, we've seen the St. Mary's development get a green light. We saw Quintera Riverwood get built. There's lands immediately to the north of River Gateway, not in the Revelstoke community, but south of the train bridge. That might be an opportunity that even the city has talked about. I'm not saying that's being greenlit, but if they are keen to get housing built tomorrow, are there parcels of land that we can save and maybe have a conversation? But they don't even want to have a conversation. And that's troubling to me, because they have an obligation to the public to share their vision, where they want to go, and again, a mutual conversation. So we will continue to do that outreach with them, but we need the other party to come to the table.
Thank you for your question, and thank you, Councillor. Please go ahead.
My question is for you. Could you please tell me where I can access that 2005 study with the criteria? Is it online somewhere?
How did you find it? I'm not sure that it is.
So
It was online until the end of December.
It's also available at the Ottawa Public Library.
So Bernie has been, thank you Bernie, I'm Linda.
Thanks for
We reached out to Bernie to try to get a copy of some of the more detailed information about each of the individual urban natural areas in that study. So you can search online and get a copy of the main study, and you can also now, we've had Bernie share with us all of the detailed assessments for each of the urban natural areas, and we've got it on our Google Drive, and we just need to actually put a link so that anyone anywhere in the city can get a copy of those files. So I haven't done that second step yet, but we will make sure that we do that on the OSEAN website, and you can, pardon me, where we put the slides? Yes, we can put links on the slides to that spot.
Can I just add to that?
So you're trying to come up.
Deborah Doherty from Bird Friendly Ottawa. We're actually in the process of asking for certification as a bird friendly city, and we actually have a link in our application to McCarthy Woods. I'll check if it's live, but we can pass that on to Lynn and OSEAN.
So we do have them all now, so we can share those.
The city also has copies of all of those areas, and I think they are supposed to be publicly available. I don't know if maybe that's something that Riley can also look into.
Abby's got it.
That's been requested. I'm working with the archives. You'll have, so I'll be passing it on to Andrei.
Thank you, Abby. John D. Reed.
Yes, my name's John Reed. I have a house that backs on to what I like to call the Southern Nature Corridor. I walk there, not this time of year, but I walk through that area, and I find that it's great relaxation. It's great for creativity when you're walking along. I would really miss it if it wasn't there. But I'm going to step back to my former professional role as an atmospheric scientist, because someone mentioned that there was a housing emergency declared by the city. Well, a few years before, there was a climate emergency declared by the city. I'm not exactly happy with what the city is doing with that climate emergency, but I haven't heard much today about the climate aspect of what you folks have been looking at, and I would like to know whether climate has been incorporated or whether it's considered perhaps not as persuasive as others.
So I did mention the climate briefly in my presentation, but it was just difficult because there's so many different aspects to this. But of course, it is a huge climate issue. It's a climate mitigation issue when you basically have an area of that size. So we're probably looking at about 250,000 trees, and those trees can help us mitigate climate change by carbon sequestration and whatnot. And then we also have a climate adaptation issue here as well. When it comes to the forest, if they clear a forest of that size, there'll be wind impacts. We've already been hit by derecos and hurricanes. There could be flooding because the root system of these trees is holding, is basically sucking up the water. And we could end up with landslides because the trees are a stabilizing force. So those are some of the big effects that could happen to us and that are a direct risk for everybody who lives in this community.